This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tiger Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Chirco, along with my usual sidekick and broadcast partner in fun. That is the Doc from Doc and Jack, John Charles McElroon. John, how are you doing?
Great, Vito. Great baseball podcast ahead. We got a special guest. Andy Dirks will return, make a second appearance on the network. We'll talk about the ALCS, the NLCS, and maybe Andy Dirks is making a pitch for a new job. Very interesting stuff.
Gotta ask him about that, yes.
What's been going on with you, sir?
I'm keeping busy. I don't have any job offers coming my way like Andy Dirks might have from Fox Sports Detroit to fill that color commentator role that is now left by Rod Allen. He is gone. Mario Impemba is gone. Now, did we talk about this, how they're both gone officially? I don't know if it's happened since the last recording, but
it was announced late last week that it was not going to be a situation in which Rod Allen or Mario Impemba would come back. Basically, they're working out a deal to basically buy out Rod Allen. Mario Impemba's contract was up.
Expiring anyways, yeah.
Exactly. So there's going to be new men in the booth. And I think right now the leader in the clubhouse, a lot of people are really behind Matt Shepard to do the job.
Yeah.
Now, my personal opinion, I think he's okay. Maybe just a little bit of a homer, a little bit sometimes a little too dry for my taste. Not as exciting as maybe others out there could be.
As who, though? You got to have the alternative. So
I would
who's
say,
the alternative to Matt Shepard, you know?
I like Dan Hasty. I like what he does out there. I've listened to a couple of his games. Maybe you do a switch where you have Dan Dickerson come.
I would like Dan Dickerson.
And then you have some people from the minors, give them an opportunity, or you go younger or things like that. But Matt Shepard is part of the establishment. I guess it would be okay. But, you know, the guy that's coming up later on in this podcast, Andy Dirks, I think would provide solid insight. Just haven't seen him in our office, the passion in which he displays, the work ethic in which I think he would bring to the job. I think he would do a great job as well. But in the end, you know, for me, it's not that big a deal who's going to be in the booth because 2019 is looking like going to be a rough year for the Detroit Tigers, maybe on par with what's going to happen this season for the Red Wings. So in terms of baseball, it's been nice to check into games 1 and 2 of the championship series in the American League. It is Boston versus Houston, and I do think it could go the distance, and I'm very excited to watch and sit down and pay attention to the series.
How about the NLCS, too? Milwaukee and the Dodgers. The Brewers blew game 2. They should have won that game.
They should be up 3-0, yes.
Should be up 3-0 on the LA Dodgers. And the Brew Crew right now look like the better team than the LA Dodgers in the NLCS, so it's 2-1 over there in that series, which you didn't mention yet. And I'm intrigued by that almost as much as the Red Sox and Houston Astros, who I think would be favored in a World Series matchup head-to-head with the Dodgers or the Brew Crew. I think the Brewers for sure will not be a favorite in the World Series if they get there, which I think more and more now, it's easy to say it. Right now it's a cop-out because they're up 2-1. But I really do believe the Brewers are going to make the World Series.
How awesome was it to see the Boston Red Sox defeat the Yankees on their home turf? Interesting stuff there. Boston handled their business. Obviously, they took advantage of some situations, but everybody that's not a Yankee fan was just like, yeah, Boston handled their business. David Price now got some retribution a little bit. A game in which he pitched, the Red Sox won. Many people in Boston were a little bit nervous after Houston took game 1. Justin Verlander handled their business. Late game clutch heroics by Houston. And then you go into game 2. It's David Price. You're like, uh-oh, he hasn't had the biggest playoff success. I think he didn't even make it to the 5th inning, gave up 4 runs. Boston was able to split at home. Now the series shifts to Houston. Who are your favorites to come out of these series?
Well, I've got Houston, and then I've got the Brew Crew. Now, I would have said Houston and Dodgers to start the AL and NLCS, respectively. But now, yeah, I'm thinking the Brew Crew actually take this series against the Dodgers, as I said already, and the Astros, the defending champs, man, who have a better starting rotation than last year, might be a better club than last year as a whole. So the Astros should be feared. They are feared, I think, by the Red Sox even though the Red Sox won 108 games, and the Astros are still the better team, in my opinion, and end up taking this series in the ALCS.
Yeah, game 1 for Houston, Justin Verlander outdueled Chris Sale, and it was a very solid performance by Justin Verlander. He continues to be a major asset for that organization, and you look over there in the National League, and you go, wow, the Brewers, a team that kind of has struggled as of late, inconsistency, but you go, you know what? when I looked over there in the bench, okay, so one day I took my wife for a date, okay, and we were having dessert. We were having some ice cream and some chocolate chip cookies, okay, and I look up, and it's the Brewers and the Dodgers. And guess who's managing the Milwaukee Brewers? Craig Counsell.
Yep.
And this is an individual that has World Series heroics. And I just sit there and I'm watching him manage, and they kind of pan and they show what his record has been with the Brewers. And I just said to myself, wow, that's the difference when you go out and get a young manager, a former player. The Tigers had an opportunity. They wanted to do that. They wanted to go out and get somebody that was young, that was strong-willed, that was a young new mind in baseball. But they went out and got Brad Ausmus, a guy that wasn't a proven winner. Craig Counsell was a guy that, in the World Series had some late-game heroics, did some things, saw World Series teams. That's the guy that could have been brought here if you wanted to have a young manager. It's a situation in which you go, fine, you know what, didn't happen here in Detroit. But then you look over to Boston, and they got half of the Tigers. They got, Ian Kinsler, David Price, Rick Porcello, and they're doing it, and they're about to be in the World Series. Now, does that bullpen collapse? Is the starting rotation enough for them to get over the hump? That checkbook is fat over there in Boston, but I look at it and I go, man, why didn't it work in Detroit? Why didn't they go out and get a Craig Counsell, a guy that could maybe be a visionary, a young cat that could handle their business? Because look, he's a young manager, and he's on the verge of taking that Milwaukee Brewers team. Vito, Milwaukee Brewers in the World Series. How weird does that sound?
Well, you know what? It's not a storyline or just a story in general that people thought would be a story coming into the season. The Brew Crew were not a favorite to even win their own division. The Cubs were, obviously, and they just blew it in Game 163. They lost in a wild card game to the Colorado Rockies, and both games at Wrigley Field, they lost to opponents that were considered weaker than them, that they were considered the favorites over. And really, it was embarrassing for the Chicago Cubs, the north side of Chicago fans who love their Cubs. And the Cubs didn't get it done this year, and Joe Maddon only has a one-year deal, no extension. He was given by Theo Epstein and company in that Cubs front office. But anyways, forget about the Cubs. It's about the Brew Crew and the great bullpen they have. Corey Knebel got it done Monday night against the Dodgers in L.A. Knebel, they got all these bullpen arms that can throw hard, too, and Josh Hader. These guys can throw flames, man, and they're really good, effective, late-inning, high-leverage situation bullpen arms that the Tigers have never had, even when they were good and won those 4 straight division crowns.
Are you jealous of the Brewers?
I am with their impressive bullpen. The Tigers never had anything like that in terms of bullpen arms. And now these guys, there's so many of them that can be used in high-leverage situations and get the job done consistently.
All right, we got a guest coming up, Andy Dirks. He sat down for a one-on-one podcast a little bit earlier this year, and you can listen to that at DetroitSportsPodcast.com or any place you can find podcasts. I'm looking forward to the conversation. What are you looking forward to in talking to Andy in a few minutes?
I got to talk to him about being the next day Tigers TV color commentator, but also about how about when he played in the playoffs. He did with the Tigers all 3 years, 2011 through 2013. I'm going to have him compare and contrast those 3 teams as well. So a lot of stuff coming up with Andy Dirks after this commercial break. And Doc, as you know, one of our fine partners at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network is the Detroit Sports Commission, which has been bringing tons of huge marquee events to the Metro Detroit area, national and international amateur sporting events and other sporting events since 2001. And to find out about all of the events they are bringing to our very region, please follow the Detroit Sports Commission on Twitter and on Instagram at DET Sports, and make sure to check out their terrific website at DetroitSports.org. The Legacy Football Organization, one of our other partners at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, Doc, as you know, and it was founded in 2009. It is the premier offseason development program in the state of Michigan, the Midwest, and the country. It provides unique platforms for student athletes on and off the field through community service, social awareness, education, and football. And you have all these former pros and college players that are involved with Legacy today. For more information, contact National Director of Football, Justin Sassante, or go to www.legacyfootballorg.com. And it is former Detroit Tigers outfielder Andy Dirks joining us on Vito's VIP line on Tigers Talk here. Andy, how are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for doing this. I've never talked to you like this for a segment, so really appreciate you and looking forward to your insight and thoughts on the ALCS, the NLCS, and Tigers baseball. But first and foremost, should I be saying that you're going to be the future Tigers TV color commentator? Is that in the works here?
Well, we haven't had a discussion, and a lot of it is you have to get an interview before you can get a job.
Yes.
So obviously, the more people can help push, I wouldn't be opposed to it and see what the options are to do it. It's something that I think I would be good at and would enjoy doing. I really do believe in a city like Detroit. It's nice to have somebody that played for the city, because unless you played for the city, it's hard to understand the fans and understand the city itself. And if you're not born and raised in Detroit or have played here, it's really tough to do it justice.
So if you were offered a contract, if you had the interview and were offered a contract, do you think you would say yes to Fox Sports Detroit?
It depends on what the contract is, obviously, to take my time. But it would definitely be an option that I would look at and consider strongly.
And you brought up how you know the Tigers fans. You played in Motown from 2011 through 2013, many great seasons there, 3 division crowns for the Tigers, 3 playoff appearances. So you saw a lot of good when you were playing for the Tigers. How would you describe the Tigers fans?
The Tigers fans are extremely knowledgeable. So Detroit is a sports city, arguably the best sports city in all of the world. You have all the major sports in one city. You have a culture that's built around sports. Everybody talks sports. Everybody enjoys sports, whether it's hockey, whether it's basketball, whether it's football. And it's an extremely loyal fan base. And what I mean by loyal is, regardless of where they live or where people end up going, once you're a Tiger, you're always a Tiger. Mm-hmm. And it's generational. You don't see that in a lot of other sports franchises and teams, other than, maybe in Philadelphia, maybe in New York. But for the most part, Detroit is a very special city for sports.
For relatively a small market, or I guess a city that is considered a mid-market club, for its sports teams, including the Tigers, I would say the fans bring the passion on the daily. And you got the chance to see that and to don the Old English D during a good stretch of baseball for the Tigers. As I said, in 2011, 2012, and 2013, the Tigers made the playoffs in each of those years. So you got a lot of postseason baseball experience. And could you, for me and for my listeners right now, Andy, compare and contrast those 3 Tigers playoff teams that you were a part of?
They were pretty much structured around the same thing. Really good starting pitching, fairly good defense and hitting. The issues that always arrived with us was a little bit of bullpen, right? Everybody says that we were 1 arm away. They weren't talking about the starting pitching, right? They're talking about our bullpen. With any situation, though, anytime you get into the playoff run, and we beat the Yankees in 4 games in 2012 to go to the World Series, we had about a 7 or 8 day stretch where we didn't play any baseball, which is a little bit challenging. The Giants were playing, I believe it was the Cardinals. They went 7 games, came off a very tough series. So they were still kind of in that go mode. We come back and we're a little flat coming out. And if you're flat against one of the best teams in baseball, you're going to get beat, right? In playoff baseball, the best way I can describe it to people, regardless of the team, regardless of what's going on, every pitch has significance. It's always that kind of, for every single pitch of the game. And that kind of intensity for 3.5, 4 hours is tough. It's tough mentally. It's tough physically. The cool thing, if you go into like Detroit, a very good fan base, the difference in like Detroit compared to when we played in Oakland is the best way I can describe this. Oakland, we went there and it's a bunch of football fans who show up during the playoffs, because if you go to regular season in Oakland, there's not a lot of fans. But in the playoffs, all the football fans come out and they're just loud. There's no home field advantage there. It's just so deafening loud all the time that I don't see it being an advantage for either side. Now, with the Tigers fans, they understand big situations. They get up for the big situations. They cheer when something happens. They understand the game, and that's where a sports city is different than a city that's surrounded by one sport. Like in Oakland, it's the football team,
So, Andy, which Tigers team was the best one that you played on that you think really had the best shot of winning the World Series? And I get it that you played in 2012 in the Fall Classic, but 2013 was a really good squad, too, that I thought if it would have made the World Series, could have and would have won it.
Yeah, 2013, we were really, really good. All the teams that I played on, I was pretty lucky. We were solid. Like I said, our starting pitching, if you look at it, we had 3 Cy Young. They hadn't won it yet, but we had Verlander, Scherzer, and Porcello. Porcello was pitching out of the bullpen, right? We had Anibal Sanchez and Doug Fister, too. In 13, we came across against a Boston team who got a big hit when they needed it. And that was kind of all she wrote. We were leading these games going into the late innings, and then they would get the big hit. And that's postseason baseball. One swing of the bat one way, one bounce of the ball one way, and it changes the outcome of the whole series. So that's why I'm saying every play matters. And even in when the Tigers were in the World Series in 2006, the pitchers couldn't field the ball. They kept throwing it around, and it probably essentially cost them a chance at winning a World Series there too. So the best team was probably 2012 and 2013. I say that because they're essentially the same squads.
And it seemed like the Red Sox in 2013 were the team of destiny. And you get that a lot in professional sports. I know collegiate sports and any level of sport. But it really did seem like that. In 2013, the Red Sox maybe weren't as talented as you and the Detroit Tigers, but they were the team of destiny. Do you believe in that being a thing, being a reality in professional sports at large, and specifically in Major League Baseball?
The only thing I can reference on this would be it's a 7-game series. So if you get the best teams in baseball, the absolute best teams in baseball, and you play 10 7-game series, the outcome is going to be fairly even at the end. So who's better that 7-game series is what matters. In the playoffs, it's as much momentum as it is anything. What kind of momentum did you come into the playoffs with? How are your series going? Are you every game, is it on the line? Those are the teams that go on a win. You see the Royals, when they had their run for 2 years in a row, they just would get hot at the right time, right? So it's not necessarily always the most talented team. It's who's playing well at the time. Look at in basketball, the NCAA tournament, right? All of a sudden, one team gets on a hot in the Final Four where talent-wise, they're not quite as good. Remember this. In Major League Baseball, once you win your division series, you're talking about the 4 best teams in the world. So everybody's talented. There's a reason that you win that many games to get there. It's not like you just flipped a coin and you just happen to be here. Every team's good. And there's sometimes, at the end of the season, some guys are beat up a little bit more. Some guys are dealing with things that people don't know about. So you gotta kind of play into a little bit of that too, and understand that maybe they're not at the best at their full capacity during that series.
Now 2 teams playing very well in the American League, Houston and Boston. We're all intrigued about how long that series could go. Supreme talent on both squads. How are you viewing that series?
Well, it's going to come down to who can hold on in the end, because both of these teams are come from behind teams. They can kill you in one inning, right? So it's going to be who can outlast with pitching and defense, because the last thing you want one of these teams to do is put up a 6 spot on you. And both of these teams are extremely capable of that. So when it comes to these guys coming out of the bullpen, their one bad inning can cost a game. And that's pretty nerve-wracking. One missed play can cost a game when you're talking of this level of baseball. You can't give these teams extra outs. So I think whoever goes at it and makes the plays, and whoever's pitchers come out and get the outs and don't give up the big inning is going to be the team that wins.
How about the NLCS now? Let's take a look at that. The Dodgers and the Brewers. And the Brewers have these great, strong, late-inning, very effective bullpen arms, such as Corey Knebel, former Tiger, Josh Hader. These guys throw heat, too, and they're extremely effective, high-leverage situation guys. How fun is it to watch that series? And who do you think comes out on top in that series as well?
It's good. I always said the Dodgers. Actually, the Dodgers are my pick to win the World Series this year. Reason being, they got some decent left-handed pitching, and they also can hit. They have a lot of energy. They have a good attitude about them, the way they go about their games, and they have guys that can drive the ball all over the field. With that said, the key for the Dodgers is going to be getting on the starter. Like you literally need to get on the starter, because you don't want to get to the 7th inning down when you got bullpens like that, because it's very tough to scratch runs, right? When you're getting against those high-end bullpen arms, the philosophy switches. It's a little counterintuitive. You want to keep the starter in the game, but score runs off of them. And this is stuff we talked about when I was with the Tigers. If a team, the Royals, when we were there, they had the best bullpen of all time in Major League Baseball. So what we're trying to do is score as many runs off the starter, maybe get to a long relief guy who we can score runs off too, knowing that the bullpen's going to be a little bit tougher. So jumping on them early is the key for the Dodgers.
And Andy, I'll leave you with this. A question about the Tigers. Since it is Tigers talk and you played for the Tigers, I got to get one in here. And the Tigers, 2 straight 64-98 finishes. What do the Tigers have to do to move up the ranks in starting with 2019?
It all starts with starting pitching. This season was the most starters they'd used since like 2002, right? If you have that kind of inconsistency on a daily basis with who's on the mound, you're never going to have a good team. It's impossible. Pitching and defense is how you win a lot of games. Offense is going to come and go. You're going to have some ups and downs. But if you know that the starter is going to go out there and at least give you a 5 solid, 6 solid per outing, in this day and age, starters are like going 4 and people are saying, great job. You got to get away from that mindset. We got to get back to, okay, how can we get outs? How can you have quality starts? You don't have to be a Cy Young winner. You don't have to post a 3 ERA. Just be reasonable and be consistent. And that's where the Tigers, I think, the first step in coming around, because they got some guys that can play defense now. Defense is not going to be the issue. We got some young athletic guys who are learning some spots, but the defense is going to be tidied up quickly. And then on the offensive side of the ball, obviously not having as many power threats is a detriment. Hopefully Miggy can get healthy, come back and have a great season. But it's nice to have some guys throughout the middle of the order who can really drive the ball and do damage at any given time. And right now the Tigers are kind of struggling. So maybe a big bat. They got speed. They got guys who can get on base. They got some different things. But a big bat and then quality starting pitching is going to be essential.
Andy, thanks for all the time and great talking to you.
Thanks, guys.
And I would like to say that was Mr. Nice Guy, Andy Dirks. Really nice guy, wasn't he? And you talked to him before in studio for a one-on-one segment, and this is the guy that could be calling Tigers games as a color commentator on FSD in the near future, right?
You can follow him on Twitter at Andy Dirks12. He does a great podcast as well, Get Your Game Right, and he's doing great things. Real estate agent too, so check out Andy Dirks and what he's doing across his social media platforms. I like his intensity. I like his inside knowledge. I think he would be great. Maybe your first gig, not as the play-by-play guy, but I think maybe the analyst position. I think
sure.
Yeah.
Well, play-by-play
is tough.
Is not going to be for him.
Exactly.
It would be the color commentator position,
Exactly.
And maybe, he's doing a podcast now. Did you say with Torrey Hunter? Is he doing that with Torrey?
No, he has his own podcast talking about getting your mindset right and batting and baseball stories. It's really good, and it's instructional, and it's not about the specifics about baseball, but it's about mindset, how you can use the numbers and use your game and your mental side and the mindset that you bring to the game to make yourself the best player. And he did a good interview with Torrey Hunter.
It was with Torrey Hunter,
yep.
Who I think could also be the next Tigers color commentator. I think he would be really interesting because he has such an entertaining personality too. So I think he'd be a good fit for that role.
I think a lot of people who messaged us, now, my opinion, I probably wouldn't mind it too bad, but a lot of people were thumbs down on the idea of Craig Monroe being the guy.
I think so. I'm 2 thumbs down.
Why?
Well, he brings energy. You need energy, so he brings one thing. But how about analysis? You just said you don't like homers.
Right.
Really? Okay, and you like Craig Monroe then?
I would say
he's a big-time homer.
I think that he brings something, maybe if you're a purist in terms of analysis, maybe you're not going to like it, but you don't think he's entertaining? It's a little bit funny, maybe.
Can be entertaining but corny.
Oh, is it?
Well, people call Johnny Kane corny. Mm-hmm. I don't think he is now. Maybe I'm biased because we've had him on Tigers Talk. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's corny. I think Craig Monroe is more corny.
Oh, okay.
And he's not hard-hitting enough.
Oh.
I want something that's, going to mean something to me.
Okay.
As well, like some analysis, deeper insight and analysis. I don't think Craig Monroe brings it or wants to bring that to the table.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Andy Dirks maybe would, though. I would love to see him get a shot. At least to call a game. Why not let the guy call a game?
Yeah.
Really, what do you have to lose? You're the Tigers. You're going to lose how many games next year? 98 again?
Right.
Let him call a game as a color commentator.
Now, some people are also mentioning, would you be in favor of maybe a rotating situation in which you bring in a bunch of guys and you just don't name a number 1 and number 2? You just have a rotating crew of guys and whoever, kind of an audition for the entire season.
What are you admitting, that your broadcasters are going to suck like the team on the field? Or the rotation of guys? Remember how many guys, he brought it up, Andy Dirks, how many guys they went through in the starting rotation?
Yeah.
So you're going to have a rotating cast of starting arms, bullpen arms, and then broadcasters. Just to fit the theme, right?
Exactly right.
There we go.
Well, it's interesting to see because a lot of people are talking about it, but I think that a lot of the media are in favor of Matt Shepard getting it. And I would be too, because if it opens up a radio spot, maybe one of our guys can sneak in.
Adam.
Maybe can sneak in
And
there.
then me, 5 or 10 years from now, then you, I don't know when, 30, 40 years when you're 80 or something on your rocker, right?
All right, so let's dig into what Andy said. Do you think that, based upon what we've seen in terms of starting pitching defense, that maybe Houston has the slight edge to get out of that series?
I think so, definitely, because of their starting rotation. It's the best in baseball. So I think they get to the World Series because of that. And I think if they play the Brewers, they're winning the World Series. No doubt, in my opinion.
Yeah, what does Boston got to do to walk away with that series?
Chris Sale has to pitch better. David Price has to pitch better. They have Nathan Eovaldi going in Game 3, which is the night of our recording, and then Rick Porcello's going in Game 4 as of right now. So I wonder if that will stay the same, because Cora has done before where Porcello's been bumped from his rotation spot in the playoff rotation because he's come out of the bullpen. So the Red Sox don't have the starting rotation or really the bullpen that equals or equates to what the Astros have in their starting rotation and in their bullpen.
Okay. Any signature moments so far that caught your attention in terms of the early games in the two series?
I would say David Price still not being that effective in the playoffs, and Chris Sale not looking as sharp, not throwing it as hard coming out of the gate for the Red Sox in his most recent playoff outing for the Red Sox. So that was a bad sign for the Red Sox right there, too. And the Astros just have the upper hand. And Verlander can outduel you. He's outdueled Sale. He's going to outduel anybody in the Red Sox rotation, in my opinion. And he'll definitely outduel anybody from the Brew Crew. Because they have who? I mean, a bunch of really not huge names. I was going to say no names, but not huge names. Gio Gonzalez, Chacin, and guys like that, Wade Miley. They're not Justin Verlander. They're not up to that standard. And they can't pitch up to that standard of him, of Garrett Cole, of Dallas Keuchel. There's just no comparison there, Doc.
Understood. Yeah, it's been fun to watch playoff baseball. The intensity, like Andy said, each moment is so significant. You can't make a mistake because if 2 runs cross, it's a major deal. And it's fun to watch that level of baseball at that level. And the World Series should be excellent with whoever advances from the American League and National League. It's been fun to watch. Now, one final thing regarding what Andy said about the Tigers. Do you co-sign what he said regarding the fact that it's got to be starting pitching and defense that's going to help you carry games? With that said, the Tigers have a decent chance with advancement in those guys, but here's the thing. It's a big if. You know, you got Michael Fulmer, who's injury-prone. You got Daniel Norris, who's injury-prone. You got starting pitchers that have potential, but here's the thing. The fine line in terms of potential versus realizing it is so thin that it's really tough to decide whether this Tigers team is going to go forward and have success with the guys that they have. Because on paper, Fulmer, Norris, Zimmerman, the young cats that have a chance to fight for that 5th spot might make up a decent rotation, but then when you go through the last couple of seasons, it seems like it's fallen apart and hasn't maintained consistency enough to get above 70 wins.
Well, I think because of the injury-ridden nature of the Tigers' rotation. So can you bank on them being a lot better next year? No, I'm not going to bank on that, and they need to add arms. That's why they added Fires and Liriano going into this season, and Fires was a blessing in disguise, wasn't he? A blessing from above, from the big man upstairs. Nobody saw Fires being as good as he was, and then being able to trade him for something of kind of quality at least. That was impressive by Al Avila and company, and that Fires became what he did. And Liriano, even for the first half of the season, then he tailed off and he wore down because of his age, and is not the guy that can start a full season in your starting rotation. So, and that was showcased at large as the second half progressed. Anyways, I digress, as I know we have to end this week's episode of Tigers Talk. And those are my final thoughts, and I do agree, yes, with Andy Dirks on the rotation having to be upgraded, and the defense has to be better too, and they actually have some defenders, but Andy did say that himself. Now, Iglesias is going to be gone, so you're losing some good defensive productivity at shortstop. But how about Jacoby Jones? How about Victor Reyes? Those guys can fly out there in the outfield and get to a lot of balls too.
Now, last week we debuted Vito's Pulpit. This week we debut Doc's Soapbox. I'm going to stand on my soapbox, and I'm going to make a statement here. When I heard the contract details of what Mario Impemba and Rod Allen were making, how in the hell are you guys going to give up that much money? They were making $800,000 combined between the both of them. $500,000 was Mario Impemba's salary per year. Look, if I'm making $500,000 a year, Vito, you could come in and punch me in the face, and I'd be like, fine, whatever, bro. I would not.
Good, I finally could punch you, that
yeah,
guy.
Exactly. You know, you could come in, and I could go to sit in my chair. You could yank it out. $500K to talk baseball, to travel the United States. What are you boys doing? How do you let that boil over? $800K between the both of them. $500,000 to call baseball. Vito, what are you doing with your pen and paper? Start calling games. I mean, you were given opportunity. You know, on the down low, you had chances to call some baseball games. Get off your ass and call some baseball games, Vito. You can make decent money, even as the guy that sits there and just goes, wow, Mario, That looked like a really tough play there. Good stuff. Back to you.
Well, yeah, Rod Allen said the same thing every single game. For how many years? That's what I mean. They made all that money for, well, they weren't pathetic, but at times, and for that to boil over, that is pathetic. And then you were saying, hey, how about these boys, rectify their issues and just get their act together? Well, they definitely showcased they were boys. They weren't men. I mean, men don't act like that. In that position, when you're making that money and you're professionals, you can't be acting like that. You got to know better. And I guess they're not really men, because men, you and I aren't going to be acting like that. Even though I'm 25, I'm not going to do that to you. I wouldn't do that to you.
Exactly. So for Doc's soapbox, I would say, look, if you're compensated that well to call baseball games, you got to be professional. You got to set an example for the youth that are watching you. And it was a huge embarrassment. And while I liked Mario and Rod, I liked the work that they did, it's time sometimes when you say, okay, 16 years, it's time to look at a fresh set of voices, and it'll be interesting to see who gets the gig. And maybe, just maybe one day, it'll be an opportunity for us to hear Andy Dirks on the television side of the call. Great job, Vito. You can follow Vito on Twitter at Vito Jerome. You can follow the network at Detroit Podcast. If you've agreed or disagreed with anything that you've heard today, feel free, lob us a voicemail, 248-579-8686, or you can message us on our Twitter pages at Detroit Podcast, at Vito Jerome. We read everything, so we enjoy the engagement and we enjoy talking baseball. Let's see how the playoffs progress. I do think it's going to be Houston and Milwaukee. Let's see how the championship series progress. Let's watch some more great baseball, Vito.
Well, thanks for taking my prediction, by the way, and just stealing it right there. And adios.